What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Eric. That's my co host, Will. And today we are getting into some players with some sneaky upside. Four guys that we've picked out specifically to talk about today. I'm excited to get into this one. But real quickly, before we do, Will, do you have anything to say to the people?
Absolutely. Thank you guys for all the support you've been showing to the channel, and we just kind of want to make sure that keeps going. So make sure you do all that great YouTube stuff. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you know when we drop all of our latest videos, and hit that like button. It's absolutely free, and it's the best way to get our stuff out there into the YouTube algorithm. But with that being said, I'm really excited about this one. This is actually going to be a pretty fun one right here.
Yeah, absolutely. These are some guys that I feel like have been kind of underappreciated or talked badly about even by the fantasy community. And so I wanted to come on here with you obviously and set the record straight with some of these guys and talk about why they could be valuable for your fantasy teams. The first player up on this list is going to be DeVonta Smith. So first of all, just to outline the case of why he's a good investment. He's safe and a low risk acquisition. He's only 25 years old. He just signed a 3-year, $75 million extension, and he's been a high end wide receiver 2 or better in each of the last 2 years in fantasy. So you don't really have to worry about that investment going to waste, obviously. But here's why I think he could be a sneaky upside or have sneaky upside. Kellen Moore is the new offensive coordinator there in Philadelphia. And with this change, I would expect an uptick in both pass volume and the use of 3 wide receiver sets. The Eagles also signed DeVonta Parker this offseason. So when they do use those 3 wide receiver sets, I expect Parker to play the Z opposite A.J. Brown, and then they can bump Smitty into the slot, which I like a lot. The reason being, the slot role in Kellen Moore offenses have been incredibly valuable for fantasy recently. Think CeeDee Lamb and Keenan Allen. And it hasn't just been valuable because he's had elite wide receiver talents in that role, which I do believe Smitty is as well. But also because of the way that Moore uses pre-snap motion to get these guys free releases and easy looks. In 2022, CeeDee Lamb led the NFL in fantasy points off of pre-snap motion, and then last year, while Kellen Moore was in LA, Keenan Allen once again led the NFL in fantasy points off of pre-snap motion. Not only that, but this would be a drastic change in the way that Smitty has been used so far throughout his career. For one, the Eagles have barely used any pre-snap motion. Last year, they ranked 30th in the NFL in that category. While Kellen Moore in the Chargers offensive coordinator role, they ranked 5th last year. That's already a massive change there. But also, since entering the league, Smitty's run only 23% of his routes from the slot, which I could see that number doubling this year or even more than that. And that's where he's been at his best. Over his NFL career so far, he ranks 7th best in yards per route run from the slot at 2.48. And if you go back to his days at Alabama, he still holds the college record for career yards per route run from the slot at 4.96. No other wide receiver has gotten over 3.6 in that regard. So I feel like Smitty was made for this role. I believe it's going to lead to the best production of his career so far. And as soon as the report comes out this offseason that Smitty has that CeeDee Lamb slot role, his price is going to go through the roof. So I would, highly advise you to act fast on this one.
I absolutely 100% agree. I think with Kellen Moore taking over this offense, just with the, past success we've seen with receivers, like you said, like Keenan Allen in an offense like this, or CeeDee Lamb in an offense like this, like that slot role, obviously it's a huge uptick for that wide receiver in terms of their role within the slot, but also just the targets that they acquire, the success that they find in the slot with the way that he draws things up with that pre-snap motion. Like you said, I think it's just the perfect setup for a career year for Smitty and just people seeing more of what he is capable of doing, because people got to remember he's one of the most highly touted, wide receiver prospects in recent memory to enter the league as well. People think just because A.J. Brown is there that he's going to take, every single target away, and that really just hasn't been the truth the entirety of the time they've been together here in Philadelphia. So just with the offense opening up even more, absolutely, I'm buying in 100%.
I love it. I love it. We're in lockstep there. Let's move on to the second guy on this list. Will, who would you like to bring up next?
So the next guy we are going to bring up, we're going to go over to the Big Apple. We're going to talk about a rookie. We're going to talk about Mr. Malik Nabers. We're talking about, some of the most explosive wide receiver prospects to enter into the NFL. Malik Nabers is up there with the best of them in terms of how he graded in, PFF's model and Eric's own, wide receiver model that he put together as well. Malik Nabers tested extremely high. But for some reason, a lot of people are out on him just because he ended up in New York. And I can see the apprehension there. It's not the best situation in the world. Daniel Jones, as we know, is not the best quarterback in the world as well. So
Yeah,
it doesn't spell, for the best situation for a rookie wide receiver. But at the same time, I think that situation can be a little bit overblown for a thing for rookie wide receivers as well. We've seen, rookie wide receivers as recently as Garrett Wilson, Drake London, guys like that find success on teams with very subpar, QB play. But, at the same time, I don't think we ever really looked at Drake London or even Garrett Wilson as the type of prospect that we look at Malik Nabers as. We think that, Malik Nabers, while he is, Garrett Wilson obviously is in that elite tier. I'm not taking anything away from him. Drake London is somewhere a little bit below that. But Malik Nabers is somewhere up there with like the cream of the crop in terms of wide receiver prospects coming into the league. Now, something that the team said that they were focusing on, something Daniel Jones himself said he was focusing on, was creating more explosive plays and creating opportunities for wideouts down the field, which is something we have seen this team struggle with immensely. I think Daniel Jones' depth of target was somewhere around 7 or 8 yards, which is pretty abysmal. But if they're able to
yeah,
bump that up, if guys like Wan'Dale Robinson are having a good camp, like the team has been alluding to, taking the pressure off a guy like Malik Nabers, who we think is going to get heavily, heavily, heavily targeted to begin his career. I think that, we haven't really seen what this Giants offense could really, provide. I think that we've seen, shades of what an offense could be, but we've never really gotten a complete picture. But with Smitty here, or not with Smitty, I'm sorry, we were just talking about Smitty. With Malik Nabers here, I do believe that does provide at least an opportunity for the offense to open up more with having that, sort of elite receiving option that we haven't seen in New York since Odell left. So it's interesting, at least, to see what's going to go forward. But Malik Nabers is a prospect himself. I'm not out at all. If anything, he's going to do fine. He's an elite prospect. He's an elite asset to have on your team. And at the same time, if anything, the QB situation should get better as time goes along. So I'm not super worried about it.
yeah. I agree with everything you said, and I might take it even a step further. Everything you said about Neighbors as a prospect is spot on, but that landing spot with Brian Daboll there and the lack of target competition that you mentioned, I think
Hmm.
he could hit the ground running in year one and be just as much of an asset for a contending team as he would be to a rebuilder.
Yeah,
So he's not going to be cheap, obviously. He's the wide receiver 8 on Keep Trade Cut right now, and I think that's right around where he belongs. I'm not saying he's like a screaming value necessarily, but just the idea that I think he could produce early on is what I want to get into people's heads because, like you said, the Daniel Jones quarterback situation isn't the best, and I think that's scaring a lot of people away. And I get it, but I mean, Neighbors being as polished, as complete, and as NFL ready as he is, and coming into a depth chart with the likes of Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, Isaiah
yeah,
McKenzie, Allen Robinson, like I could see north of 130 targets for him his rookie season. You mentioned the importance of the deep ball and those explosive plays. That's absolutely where he's at his best. That's where he
hmm,
was at his best in LSU, and I think that's going to translate to the next level. One of my comps for him in the pre-draft process was Stephon Diggs, who Brian Dable is really familiar with. He had 3 of his most productive fantasy seasons under Brian Dable, and so I think he's going to seamlessly work Neighbors into this offense. And also, as much as we've talked crap about Daniel Jones, which warranted,
hmm,
but I think that Neighbors will kind of be a good fit for Daniel Jones, considering he's not the best processor. He can take too long with the football, hold on to it for too long. Another area where I feel like Neighbors really excels is in that scramble drill, working back to his quarterback, finding those soft spots in zones, and making himself a viable target. So even if Daniel Jones doesn't take a step, doesn't improve, which honestly I don't really expect him to, I think there's plenty of room for him to be a very productive asset this year and beyond.
absolutely agree, 100%.
So I like that one there. That's another sneaky upside play. We're halfway through. Let's get on to our third player here. We're going to switch positions. We're going to the tight end group. And the guy that I want to bring up is Pat Freiermuth. On the other hand, we just talked about Malik Nabers being expensive. Pat is very cheap, currently valued outside the top 12 Dynasty tight ends. So once again, a low risk investment. Part of the reason I think you shouldn't be sleeping on him is simply because I think he's a really talented tight end. A lot of
Hmm.
people are forgetting about that. As you can see in this tweet from Guru Fantasy World, he was productive in college, 25% dominator rating. He was an early declare coming into the NFL, and he got that round 2 draft capital. In his first 2 seasons in the NFL, he racked up 177 targets. The only tight ends with more targets in their first 2 seasons were guys like George Kittle, Jeremy Shockey, Jimmy Graham, Gronk, Evan Ingram, and Aaron Hernandez. pretty good group to be associated with, in my opinion. Another reason I think that he could have some sneaky upside is due to all of the offensive changes that happened in Pittsburgh this year. The biggest of which being at quarterback. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields come in. They join the team and replace the likes of Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. Obviously, it's not like the sexiest or the most exciting addition, but I think it's hard to argue that that's not a considerable improvement from what they were working with to begin with. Also, offensive line upgrades. We talked about that in our last video with Najee Harris. That should facilitate a much more efficient and higher scoring offense because pass blocking was one of the things that they were worst at last year. And then another notable departure is Deontay Johnson. Deontay was a target hog. He got so many targets funneled his direction, and in a similar area of the field that Pat likes to work in, that short and intermediate section. And so with him out the door, I think Pat becomes the clear number 2 receiving option for the Steelers, and with basically no viable target competition beyond that. And then I hesitate to bring this up because I know people are going to push back in the comments and stuff like that. But on top of all that, they bring in Arthur Smith as the new offensive coordinator. Again, a reason why people are going to, be up in the air about whether it's good or not.
Yeah, they're going to talk about Kyle Pitts and, oh, man, Kyle Pitts didn't do this, he didn't do that, but I'll let you go. I'll let you go.
Yeah, no, and it's fair. I get it. We've been shitting on him ever since he joined the Falcons, but the last time that we saw him as an offensive coordinator, not as a head coach, he was pulling the strings for one of the most efficient play-action attacks in the NFL in Tennessee, and one that heavily incorporated the use of tight ends. If you remember, Smith was actually the tight ends coach for Tennessee for 4 years prior to getting that offensive coordinator job. Slipping over all my words right now. But also that year in 2020, Jonnu Smith put up the most fantasy production of his career in that system. So if he can stay healthy, I'm predicting 100-plus target season for Freiermuth, which could easily vault him into that top 10 dynasty conversation.
No, I absolutely agree with that as well. Like you said, he has 2 quarterbacks now who are both, considered upgrades over what the situation was last year. 2 guys who love throwing the ball to tight ends as well, and Russell Wilson and Justin Fields too. So I think that no matter who it is back there at quarterback, Pat Freiermuth is just going to benefit from it because, like you said, he's going to start the season at the very least as the number 2 guy out there on the field, I feel like, in terms of receiving options. Maybe someone will emerge. Yeah, like maybe someone will emerge as the season goes along, but I don't really see anybody on this roster more talented than Pat Freiermuth or George Pickens in that instance. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and something that I kind of hesitated to bring up because I don't know that it would necessarily be an improvement over Russell Wilson just because of lack of passing volume. But if Justin Fields does become the starter or sees starts throughout the season, you mentioned he's one of the highest targeters or has one of the highest target rates of tight ends of any quarterback in NFL history. Really. Yeah. In terms of him not targeting wide receivers, he does it at one of the highest rates we've ever seen. So regardless of who's there at quarterback, I think that the tight ends are going to be heavily involved.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. Because I think it's going to be a big part of their plan. It kind of has to be. Because who else? Like Roman Wilson's next guy up after that. I'd assume.
That's really it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think great bet to make right there.
Absolutely. All right, so that is our third sneaky upside play. Let's move on to the last player on this list, and Will, I'll let you lead us off.
Absolutely. We are going to talk about the angriest runner in the NFL, Mr. Isiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. We got him here as a value and as a sneaky upside play, and I personally feel like, this is kind of follows my philosophy of fantasy football. I really like to look at how people end seasons because I feel like that's indicative of how seasons are going to start. And who better to look at than the guy who, one of the running backs who played the most games out of anybody because he made it to the Super Bowl. So we actually get to look at quite a bit of data in terms of, how Isiah Pacheco ended his season out. Now, in terms of last year, in terms of attempts, he averaged about 14 carries per game, which, not amazing, but also pretty good. That's great volume to have in an elite offense. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's not going to be a guy who's carrying 20 times a game. He could, and he's done it before, but it's not really a consistent thing. His targets also went up quite a bit last year as well. He became more of a receiving threat, and especially down the stretch, that went up quite a bit. Looking at Week 16 in particular, 7 targets, turning that into 7 receptions, 35 yards, and a touchdown. Like I said, he's in one of the most high-powered offenses out there. They refuse to bring somebody in to replace him. So I think at this point it's safe to say they really like Isiah Pacheco, and he does everything that they need him to do. even with the exit of Jerick McKinnon from the team, they didn't really bring anybody in to replace that. So it seems like a lot of that receiving volume, some of that stuff could be moving towards Isiah Pacheco going into this season as well. So, you got a guy who's getting at least 14 carries a game. He's getting probably around 3 to 4 targets a game as well as a receiver, at least. He's in one of the most high-powered offenses connected to the best quarterback in the league in Patrick Mahomes. He's got the solidified goal line role because there's really nobody else that could take that role from him in terms of rushing at the goal line. I just don't see where the real negative is here in this situation besides maybe you want to say he gets dinged up every once in a while, but he plays running back. So what running back doesn't? So I don't,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? So in terms of everything that could go right for Isiah Pacheco in this situation, a lot of stuff is stacked in his favor. He's only 24 years old still, or may have just turned 25 actually. But still, younger guy as well. Someone you could still attach to that's a very good running back in a great situation.
Yeah, no, I love everything that you said. The receiving aspect is one that I wanted to mention specifically, and you brought it up. He went from 14 targets in his rookie year all the way up to 49 targets this past year, and managed to catch 44 of those 49 targets, which for a running back, that's an incredibly high rate. And yeah, one of the biggest offseason winners in all of Dynasty. I fully anticipated them to bring in more competition, to bring in a pass catching role, somebody like that to replace Jerick McKinnon, and they did not. So we could see that side of his game improve even further, at least volume wise, get even better. We're talking about a guy that has been fairly efficient as well, always above 4.5 yards per carry. And in an offense that, we all know that they're one of the best offenses in football, but they had kind of a down year last year from an efficiency perspective. And their touchdown scoring, their red zone ability. I think that if that goes back to the mean, goes back to what they've been used to, then Isiah Pacheco's touchdown upside is going to be through the roof as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't see a lot of arguments against him. This is definitely kind of a change in perspective for me this offseason. He's a guy that I haven't really been in on prior to this offseason. But yeah, I'm more than in on him as a value, whether it be in redraft or dynasty.
It's just hilarious because last season when we talked about him, before last season that started, I remember we were joking about in camp. I was like, man, I seen a lot of videos of Isiah Pacheco catching back shoulder fades. I wonder what that means.
Yeah.
And we were like, I can't be anything. And then he went from 14 to 49 targets. So maybe that did mean something. I don't know. But it's just, it's funny, man. But obviously, like you said, the opinion on Isiah Pacheco, I feel like as just the community has evolved. So I wouldn't even say that's just on us. We all expected them to bring in more competition, but I mean, I guess he's done every single thing that they've expected him to do, and obviously he's done it well. He's won 2 Super Bowls, so you can't really be mad at what you get there,
Yeah, and he's currently sitting as the RB13, which I don't think is unreasonable. But I could make the argument for him to be above a guy like James Cook, potentially to be above a guy like Jonathan Brooks. Obviously, the offensive environment is way better. Kenneth Walker is kind of a shaky RB10 with Zach Charbonnet sitting above him there. So there's some room for him to kind of improve, especially if he had a huge season this year. So definitely a guy that I think is worth having on your radar as a contender.
Absolutely.
But yes, I think that will round things out. That's 4 guys for you that we think are underappreciated, have some sneaky upside that you should absolutely consider adding to your dynasty teams if you can. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this video, what you think of our list. If there's anybody else that you believe has some sneaky upside that people are sleeping on, drop it down there and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. If you enjoyed the content, leave a like, hit that subscribe button like Will said at the top. We would really appreciate that support. But yeah, I think that's all I have. Will, do you want to round us out here?
Yeah, make sure you guys check out the sponsors as well. Link down in the description below at Do Numbers and Choice Music Group. We always make sure we add a snippet to the end of the video, so make sure you check out that song. And yeah, if you guys made it this far into the video, as always, always forget this too. Check out the link to the Discord, guys. Join the Discord.
Check it out.
Plenty of people talking football, especially as things are starting to heat up a little bit. So looking forward to having more people in the community. So join up if you guys want to have that more personal one-on-one conversation. Me and Eric are in the Discord, so we will be active in there. So come by and say what's up. But as always, if you guys made it this far into the video, we love you. And we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.